Later on, there's a part where they show stills of trees, like literal like
Oh,
pictures.
I loved it. Yeah. So this is like,
what is this? Like, they keep being playful with how they're presenting the show.
and that's one of my favorite parts that's bordering into like experimental film. They're literally showing like different aspect ratios of black and white photograph. And you're like, this is breaking the form right now. We're breaking the form of film. Welcome back, friends, to episode 381 of the Ink to Film podcast, where we read the book and then see the movie. I'm filmmaker James Bailey.
And I'm writer Luke Elliott.
And this week we discuss Jack Thorne's 2026 series, Lord of the Flies. Okay, so last week we covered the William Golding novel from the 50s, and now here we are with this BBC production miniseries, really, 4 episodes. I was having a good time with this. You know, I didn't know necessarily what to expect. We talked about it a little bit last week, but yeah, what was your overall experience?
This was a journey for me, I guess. We covered the book last week and talked about how it is this novel of ideas that we were sort of engaging with as like the main vehicle. We were like kind of debating the ideas being presented and how we felt about them. The story kind of took a back seat because I was familiar with it. I was able to focus more on those ideas. I still engage with the ideas because there's like I would argue, a slight difference here. There's like some certain things introduced that weren't present in the novel that recontextualizes things a little bit. Mm-hmm. But all that is to say, I found I was able to engage with the characters and the story more directly and emotionally than I had done with the novel. And again, that might just be something to do with having read it before, but this was kind of new, even though it was, I would argue, pretty faithful. It was kind of a new look at it, and I ended up enjoying it quite a bit. And like I said, it was a journey because they were doing some things that I'm still kind of wrapping my head around and figuring out how I feel about them, and stylistically, visuals. Things that at first I thought were weird and weren't working, but then like kind of won me over. So like, I'll be interested to talk with you about some of those choices, and what they might have been going for, and what might have been like deliberate, and what might have been kind of just like a thing they had to do because of the way they were shooting this thing. Yeah,
I mean, I'm excited to talk about it, especially visually. I think they did do some pretty notable things as far as the look of this, especially when we get into the nerdy camera stuff that I want to talk about. But just to mention, last week in that book coverage, we talked, about our experience with the material and how like a lot of people, especially Americans in school, read this story, and how like that's kind of, I mean, and it's really a British story. And this is a British adaptation, so that's cool to see as well. So I assume, worldwide, a lot of people are reading it.
Certainly English-speaking, like Western world. It's a very big book. So I'm curious to see how this miniseries does. And it just got released in the States. That's why we're kind of covering it now. I think literally came out on Monday, so it's very new.
It'll have been a week, I think, since we recorded when people hear it. So but yeah, it came out early May.
Maybe we should say like we're gonna go through all 4 episodes chronologically, but trying not to spoil things until we arrive at them. And then also, like, early on, we're going to talk a little bit generally, but it should be spoiler-free. Even though this story is, like, pretty old and, like, you kind of know, I don't want to spoil the miniseries for people, because they might be, like, wanting to experience it.
Yeah, because it's a newer release.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, but with what you were saying, I found Golding's book to be pessimistic about like the human, especially sort of masculinity, and like the idea that like there's this inherent violence and evil within us that's just like just so ready to break through if society crumbles or whatever. And I think that this miniseries kind of adjusts that slightly. I think there's still the violence and the sort of trend that we can see of like young men being sort of lured into these
radicalized,
I don't know, tribes or these sort of like people that they identify with, and how that can sort of spiral out, and historically violence and power struggles can take effect. But you mentioned just the look of the show too. I I mean, a lot of this was clearly shot on location, which I think is really cool. And
Yeah,
it's,
great.
it's overall really beautiful. There's some amazing cinematography here.
Gorgeous, honestly, yeah.
Yeah. I guess we can talk about this without spoiling it, that like each episode centers a different character.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a really fun structural way of approaching this story, which allows for kind of what you were talking about, us to live closer with some of these characters like Jack and Simon, where like we're getting sort of their POV on everything that's going on. And in that way, I think like sort of made the characters more complex and in some ways sympathetic.
Yeah.
And you can see maybe a trend of what I assume Thorne was trying to do here with this miniseries.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to explore that as we go. They definitely took that as an opportunity to introduce some more backstory and context for what's happening, which you might think is like just like, of course you're going to do that in a 4-hour miniseries. Like you have more time than you do. And like what was a fairly short novel. Yeah, you're going to explore some of these things, but like it's not, it does when you're taking this story and doing that, introducing elements like that changes things slightly. And we can get into what I think the backstories for kind of like each character adds to the story, and what sort of context and I don't know what ideas perhaps he's introducing here that maybe aren't present in the book, or at least maybe is just an interpretation of the book. So I guess if you're like a book purist who wants the message to remain exactly the same with no new angles, then you might be a little frustrated with this. But I do think if you can like ease off of that a little bit, you could appreciate that this is actually an incredibly faithful, and the stuff that is introduced, I don't think completely changes the messaging of the book. It just changes it, shifts it maybe a hair, maybe a little bit one way or another. And I think being open to that is good, because it's like, this is an adaptation. It's not the original. The original is going to exist, has existed for a long time, will continue to exist after this adaptation. And this is a different version. And so it's going to have a slightly different thing, and that's okay. And ultimately I'm good with it. And I rather liked, I think, where these editions took the story.
Mostly because we talked about last week, Golding was so much responding to his era, coming off the heels of World War II and what he saw personally.
He was a D-Day veteran and like all kinds of stuff, yeah.
And so like that inherent sort of, trauma that he had experienced and how that can shape your worldview in a lot of ways. And then fast forwarding to now, I think that, like you said, some of these changes are still in the spirit of what I think Golding was trying to say, but do kind of add some nuances in terms of like maybe deciding that there are multiple paths versus like this inherent sort of violence and evil that Golding may have been sort of I don't know, assuming was.
Yeah. Or maybe like there's some reasons that the book maybe doesn't provide. But maybe there's some like you can track like this led to this versus like this is just inherent to the hearts of humanity. And like this is just going to happen when you leave a bunch of humans together.
People who love this story, I assume, would say that it's not necessarily on the page, but there's some implication there that there is more.
Yeah.
Obviously, like there's so much left out of the story that we're just sort of picking up on these children on the island. And there's sort of stuff at the peripheral. And maybe you can assume some of these other more complicated things are happening with why these characters sort of respond the way they do in this environment. But the show chose to kind of add in those elements.
So in a different direction, I want to highlight that this show does not shy away from the very adult, violent, dark material. I never felt like this was a show aimed at children. This felt like an adult show starring a bunch of children. And that's a difficult tightrope to walk a little bit, because you have to make them believable as children who are young. They're like 11, 12 at most, some of them even younger. It's difficult to have those characters lead a 4-hour miniseries that really doesn't feature hardly any adults at all.
No.
And have them carry it feel dramatic and powerful and serious and treat you seriously without, delving into like YA territory of like, this is aimed at young folks. Well, I don't think like a younger person could watch this and get plenty out of it. They're just not They're not downplaying anything or like talking down at all. I don't know.
Yeah.
I thought it handled that stuff really well, and I was impressed with it.
Yeah, I mean, there's like graphic depictions of violence, and then one of the things that I would say about the show too is that it to me kind of felt like a throwback of sorts in an interesting way. Like the pacing of the story, there's some elements too that are very interpretive, where this show just kind of lets you sit with shots and like sort of editing two shots together to provide meaning, or like staring into a character's face and trying to pick out like what they're going through.
They do that a lot, and I thought it was really effective, and just like
yeah.
kind of uncomfortably showing you or forcing you to look into these kids' faces and see the humanity there, but also see like the trauma and the, I don't know, just everything
Fear.
going on, right? And but like you said, this show doesn't do the thing where it's putting its thumb so hard on the scale into one direction, where it's like, we're going to move this really heavily into a message that I want to tell. There's still a lot of things that are open to interpretation. There's a lot of ambiguity in this story. There's a lot that you could be left to wonder about and talk about after it's over. And I think that's one of the things that has made Lord of the Flies stand the test of time, is that you can read it in a classroom and have a discussion. And like every year, if you're a teacher, every year when you do this, like there's going to be some differences in people's reactions to it. And as times change, things are going to seem different. And I thought the show maintained that like ambiguity, even as it started to introduce more elements. There's still a lot left unanswered and kind of unresolved, yet at the same time, like I really felt like the show sucked the landing. And I was, worried about that a bit, about like, how is this going to come together? Like, where is this headed? And I thought like it did a good job with that. Ultimately, we're going to get into each episode and our, final thoughts here at the end, but just like, all in all, my takeaway was positive. I see why this show has good reviews. I think it's like, I saw it's like 92% on Rotten Tomatoes or something. Like it's doing well critically, or at least with fans, audiences too. And I can see why. I think it has a lot going for it. I think if you have read Lord of the Flies, you should absolutely watch this. And if you haven't read Lord of the Flies, this actually might be a really fun way to kind of experience the story. Not saying you shouldn't read the book, because you should, but this is a good version of it to dive into, and I think you'll get the experience.
And like you said, there's maybe a version of this that does kind of play towards children, because there's children in it, while there's the children read it in school.
Sure.
Maybe there is like a thought of doing that, but I know the Golding Estate had turned down multiple attempts at adapting this, and I think Thorne even brought. The filmmaker here brought an earlier version that they didn't necessarily agree with, and then he found this way of approaching it with like 4 different characters that I think they really liked. But that it's so important that, like you said, maybe this is kind of an adult show, but I think it's also for the children who are reading the book, because it takes most things that are in the book, especially like depictions of violence, and just puts it in the story as it was, and like allowing like children, I think, in some ways to see this can be moving and powerful and scary, but that's kind of some of what the story is attempting to do, and like I think those perspectives are important for children to experience in a controlled environment. And so I like the idea that it was like made for, and that's something about the BBC, right? Let's talk about that a little bit. They are a government arm that funds arts, and in that way they don't necessarily have to try to release something and make a bunch of money. And so like they want it to, obviously, because that would be beneficial, but like they can make things kind of and I know, like, I don't know, government sanctioned art sounds kind of weird when you think,
well,
like,
there's sanctioned, but then there's also
in a
government
way.
funded or like,
right, like PBS
supported,
Right. PBS is like the public broadcasting station here that we have, and like unfortunately it's being defunded like crazy.
Because like otherwise you have private companies controlling it, and that's not always better, certainly.
Right. This is a risk in having it be all children acting, sort of a more adult themed story. Who is the audience here is like, maybe you could see it being a little more complicated than your typical story, and yet they went forward with it, and they clearly poured resources into it. It's well shot, it's well produced. Like the really the 4 actors that carry this are really solid, and I see bright futures for all of them.
Yeah, they were really good. I agree. So one thing I forgot to mention last week, and I had seen this in my research, was that Stephen King has cited Lord of the Flies as like a key influence on his writing, in particular of It, which was the first project we ever covered. And I think you can see a little bit of Ben Hanscom in Piggy and vice versa. And so maybe you could see some influence there. And one of the things that we love about It is it's like, yeah, it's about a bunch of kids, but like clearly kind of aimed at adults, but not aimed at children too. Instead, it's like treating children seriously and their issues and their traumas and the violence that they often face as they start to entangle into the adult world. Like we try and like sometimes we want to like believe that children exist in this world that's separate from the adult world, and yet like that's kind of a false belief. As much as we want that to be the case to like preserve innocence, but like it's just kind of not possible, especially at a certain point. And that's, I think, at the heart of this story as well. So that loss of innocence and that transition into more adult things. And I love the way it handles that all seriously, and it takes these kids' traumas and problems very seriously. And I think younger audiences will respond to that, because I think too often they feel like, yeah, like everything's kind of being Disneyfied, if for lack of a better term. It's like a rosy view of what childhood is, and it's very kind of coddling, and like this is like, no, let's talk about the real shit.
Definitely, yeah. So let's talk about the development and really the filmmaker here.
Yeah, because I don't know that I know anything about this. The name doesn't sound familiar. All newcomers, as far as, I mean, they're young, so it's kind of to be expected, but yeah, I know nothing about this.
Okay, so Jack Thorne is a British playwright, screenwriter, and producer. I'm going to tell you some of the things he's best known for first. He's best known for writing the stage play Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, and films Wonder, Enola Holmes, and the latter sequel.
I did see Enola Holmes. I think the first, is it a movie or series? I can't remember.
It's a movie on Netflix that dropped. It was Millie Bobby Brown and Henry Cavill.
Yeah. I did watch that. It was all right.
Yeah. He also wrote His Dark Materials. That's the HBO adaptation.
The adaptation?
Of that.
Oh, cool.
Yep.
Yeah, people that seem to like that. We have not covered that one yet. And we also haven't covered Enola Holmes, which, by the way, is, I think, also based off a book series.
He also co-wrote 3 connected miniseries based on the film This Is England, which is This Is England 86, 88, and 90. And then more recently, something that he really blew up with was... it's a mini series called Adolescence that was released on Netflix
I've been
this
seeing
past year.
this. Netflix thinks I'm going to like it. And so I watched a trailer for it, and I was like, ooh, this does seem like something I would enjoy.
You're going to like it. It's got that investigation element, sort of court drama, but also...
kind of true crime vibe to it.
But you've probably heard this as well, because I've seen the show, and it is great. Every episode is a complete oneer all the way through.
That's really cool.
Yeah, so it's 1 hour episodes.
They're not real runners, right? Like I'm sure they're
real
hiding
oneers. They're
real
taking
oneers?
the cameras like out windows into cars. You're in the car for 5 minutes with the characters while they go from one location to the next. I'm telling you, like full on oneers.
That's crazy. That's a flex, man.
It was definitely like all the talk. I think it won Emmys and stuff. It was a big deal last year for sure. And then there's an interesting sort of connection here to this show, Lord of the Flies, because they were both shot relatively at the same time, like one after the other. And both are dealing with masculinity. Adolescence deals with masculinity in sort of the manosphere context. And then this is dealing with masculinity, obviously, based in like, post World War II, 1950s sort of culture with, and then like showing these boys, kind of reacting in certain ways based on what they've seen and learned from the world.
Yeah, but I think also it doesn't not speak to the modern world, right? Because
absolutely.
There's certainly an element of being drawn to strong men, and what like you could see how it starts to develop feels a little scarily familiar to me.
For sure. And that's why, again, the story's unfortunately somewhat timeless as well.
Yeah.
I don't know that I believe that human beings, and specifically men, are inherently violent, period. But there is absolutely a violence within many. And that's just, goes to show how division and hate and a lot of these things like are seemingly universal in this world, and that like there are specifically fears really that people prey upon to sort of like pull people to within their orbit. And, how powerful that can be when the sort of masses are being manipulated in a way like that.
Yeah, I don't think people are inherently evil, because I don't necessarily believe in the concept. But there is certainly a tension between a more sort of primal, animalistic id, I think, in all of us that just doesn't want rules, just wants to, have fun, as they say, the fun camp, right? Just wants to explore those sort of base urges. And then there's a part of us that craves society, craves social contact, safety, and community. I think those two things are like constantly at war with each other, and all people, not just men. Yeah, I think this show does a good job of exploring that and getting into maybe some of the things that can influence that.
Yeah. So a little more about Jack Thorne. He, as I said, is a playwright as well. So he sort of started out writing for the stage, creating plays in general. He has made an adaptation of Let the Right One In, which is a production on stage, which I noted
stage
just because
production.
it's
Cool. Yeah, that's a former project of ours.
former project of ours.
Did the original. Oh, we also did the American remake as like a bonus, I think.
Many things that he worked on through the early 2000s and then up until he writes Harry Potter and the Cursed Child alongside J.K. Rowling, who we have covered on the podcast before, but for obvious reasons have not returned to that property.
For reasons of turfdom. Yeah.
Yes. And then he has created an adaptation of A Christmas Carol.
Another former project of ours, Christmas Carol. Okay, so maybe this is someone I should have known about. Although admittedly, I don't follow the stage stuff very much.
I already mentioned as far as television, his Dark Materials. I saw that he wrote for shows that I watched, like BBC shows that I watched, or at least British shows. Skins and Shameless were two.
I haven't seen either of those.
Yeah.
I know about them both, though. I've heard of them.
Philip K. Dick's Electric Dreams. You remember when that came out a few years ago?
Oh, yeah, that sounds familiar. I don't remember much about it. I didn't see it.
He wrote episodes of that.
Cool. This guy does a lot of adaptations, it sounds like, honestly.
That's kind of what I was keying in on in his work.
Yeah.
There's other stuff that he does that aren't adaptations, but I was definitely trying to bring a lot of
them,
those.
though.
His first film was called The Scouting Books for Boys, which released in 2009. It won him Best Newcomer at London Film Fest. He was attached to rewrite the script for the last Star Wars film that came out, Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker, but ended up being replaced when things shifted to being J.J. Abrams.
Tragic.
Yeah.
Because I do not like that movie.
Yeah,
that's a whole nother podcast, though.
Yeah, it's the worst one, I'd say, or at least in the running.
Yeah.
He also wrote a treatment for Tron Ares, I believe, which was the most recent Tron film.
Some people I know who saw that said it was actually pretty enjoyable.
Really? I heard the opposite. I heard the opposite.
I don't know.
I have to check it out myself.
It, so.
I like Tron Legacy, especially the Daft Punk sort of thing of it all.
Yeah.
And I know like Trent Reznor and Nine Inch Nails kind of stuff was like a cool part of Ares.
That's the new one. Yeah.
Yeah. Jared Leto, I think, is just like.
Jared Leto is definitely not a selling point for that movie.
Anyway, so I do say all that to just paint a picture of he's written, directed, showrun, playwright. He's all of these different things.
Cool. Impressive body of work. It sounds like he's actually someone we might be returning to at some point because there's a lot of adaptations in there.
And as I said, that adolescence show, like it really was probably the talk
I've been meaning
of
to get to that
last year.
That looks like a show I'm gonna like for sure.
Yeah. It was definitely in the running for one of the best shows of last year. And I really enjoyed it, especially the technical side of things. Casting, I think we should talk about some of these kids because quite impressive. One of them, his name's Lox Pratt. He plays Jack. Struck me as so Malfoy-esque. And then I was like, where have I seen him before? And I realized that he's playing Malfoy in the upcoming Harry Potter HBO remake.
Really? Yeah. He's Malfoy-esque, but also like a Joffrey.
Yeah,
kind of character. Yeah, definitely like just like shitty young guy who.
Well, he's like he shows up and he's like very pompous with the choral group and everything, and like I'm like, oh man, this is giving me. And I know I'd seen the trailer, so I knew that like I'd seen his face before, and it kind of kept coming up, and I was like, I looked it up after I finished the show, and I was like, yeah, I fucking knew it, dude. That guy's Malfoy.
No, he's good though. He's really good.
Yeah, he's really good. He's impressive for a young person like that. Mm-hmm. Like I really do think mixed is a safe term to say about how I feel about that HBO series. But I wish the creatives and people involved the best. But what a fucking tumultuous journey they're on. And being attached to J.K. Rowling and so much else, and just being compared to those original films too. Like I don't know. Anyway,
that would be another whole podcast. Yeah, he's good. Excited to see what he does maybe after Harry Potter. It'll probably make him a huge star, though, because that show's probably going to do well. I don't know. We'll see. But David McKenna, who plays Piggy here, I thought was incredible. I think this is a young star in the making as well. Really, all the leads are quite good, but David McKenna is also notable because he's the star, essentially, of the first episode. And I think you could argue he's kind of the heart and soul of Lord of the Flies. I think he serves that way in the novel as well.
Definitely wise beyond his years. Like you just watch him and then his mannerisms. I'm like, this kid is like 50. You know what I mean? Like he's got those sort of mannerisms.
Part of that's how he's written, I'm sure, because it's like he knows more than he should almost.
Yeah, but he just kind of seems like an old soul. Like I just, and I think the kid, like that's within the performance. So I think he did a great job.
Yeah, he does a good job with it for sure.
Winston Sars is Ralph.
Yeah.
And I thought he did a good job. He was charismatic, more likable than I expected. I talked last week about like this sort of politician.
There are some small changes with Ralph's character and what exactly happens that I think push him into a little bit more of a likable space.
I was always getting from the book sort of politician charisma, sort of magnetism and everything. And in this, it seemed more like organic. And I bought
natural,
it.
Natural leader, kind of like someone who just takes charge naturally and is actually well suited for it, and maybe a little bit more goals, like what we should want in leadership.
Yeah.
Like he's kind of set up to be a more attainable or sought after, something we should seek after, I guess, kind of leader.
Right. He's not infallible,
No.
but he is sort of noble. He's got like a good streak in him. You can tell
Heroic,
that he wants the best.
Brave, defends people. He's not perfect. He certainly makes mistakes throughout, but he pushes him more into a different direction.
Yeah, he's also a kid, and you can see some of that immaturity flare up
For
at
sure.
times. Yeah. Last person I do want to talk about here is Ike Talbot, who plays Simon. Who I thought was really good at doing this sort of like unstuck sort of child, like who can't find a place and feels like, again, like his seizures are a part of it, but also he sort of has, I don't know, a sixth sense, it almost feels like. And he feels like his experiences have led him to be sort of like a dreamer or something. Like he seems like somebody who's kind of in his own head a lot.
Yeah, they call him Batty or something. And he kind of isn't super prevalent until it becomes his episode in episode 3. That'll be a really interesting one to talk about, but I think it was one of the standouts. I really liked that episode, and I agree. I think he's a powerful performance, and he's definitely one of those kids who they can just kind of show his face, and it's left for us to interpret what is going on there. Like, what is he actually thinking? And he's mysterious. There's a lot going on behind the eyes, and you're like, what is he thinking? What is he even feeling right now? I don't know.
Or his actions, like he does stuff sometimes, and you're like, what's the motivation? Why is he doing this? Is this some sort of fit, or is it something that he's just like he wanted to do? Like, I don't know. We can talk more about that when we get there. Anyway, there's a few other kids who are really good here.
Yeah, but those are the leads who lead the 4 episodes, and they're all really good. I agree.
So I guess here, before we jump into plot, I do want to say some of the techniques that were used to film this. The first shot of the entire show is Piggy waking up on this island.
Yeah.
And they use this crazy fisheye lens.
Okay, I called it a fisheye lens, and I wasn't sure if it was. I was like, I'm going to ask you, is this what you would call a fisheye lens? So you would.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because it is warped and strange, and I loved in this first episode, we're going to start getting into it. It establishes this like dirty, wet, unsafe feeling where we keep getting shots of like wildlife, of like the bushes and the sort of danger of this space surrounding him. It's not this like it's not like a tropical fun vibe. It's like a pretty threatening vibe, and stuff is just unsettling. And this also starts to introduce something that I thought was an absolute standout, and I can't believe I haven't said it so far. The music in this show, the scores. Are incredible at doing this like unsettling vibe where like often it's like taking different sounds and like using them in the score. So like it'll introduce a sound that they hear, and then that'll kind of become a part of the score. And like especially later on, they're doing that a lot. But here it's just this like weird, like something feels off and wrong. And then at the same time you're deploying this fisheye lens, which definitely gives you that warped, something is weird and perspective is off here too. So that was my read of it, and I really liked it.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I am so sensitive to these things, right? So when I see this, it's immediately disorienting. It's off-putting almost. It was so much of a fisheye that like at times you can almost see the vignetting. That was crazy to me. Literally one shot in particular, which was just like a small, you almost imperceptible. But also the other thing that's happening here is they're shooting a lot with like anamorphic lenses, which squeeze footage basically into like if your sensor is like a square, if it's open gate at least. These old lenses allow for like really wide fields of view, but because the sensor or film stock historically are like squares or rectangles, what you have to do is you de-squeeze it. So it's the footage if you were to look at it in playback, it looks squeezed together. And then what they do in post-production or back in the day, they did it manually. They would literally extend out basically the video if it's a digital file, and by in doing that, it introduces all these like aberrations and like sort of like spirals and different like shaped bokeh, which is just like when something's out of focus, like the shape that it takes on.
Weird.
And there was so much happening in this show too, where it was like definitely shot like heavily anamorphic, and shooting it with this fisheye. Like they're doing so much to create like disorientation. We talked about some anamorphic stuff with Poor Things as well, where they have like sort of swirling things that are out of frame, or things that are out of focus are sort of swirling, and it seems like there may even be like a ring, like almost a halo of area that's in focus, and then other areas aren't. And that can be with like diopters as well, like different kinds of like basically like lenses or filters you can put inside before the sensor or after the lens. And anyway, in doing all of this, they're doing so much visually to be, again, disorienting, make it feel weird, like another world, like, and in doing it to that extent, of course, audiences are going to pick up on it. Like you picked up on it. And that's like, I think that they pushed it basically to the line of it being too much, which it took some getting used to in that first episode for me, where I was like, I would prefer us back off from the fisheye for now, because it's starting to really freak me out.
Yeah, I mean, like early on, it was like when I was still kind of unsure about this show and what it was doing stylistically, I was like more on the fence at it. But now that, because like I kind of know that I like the show overall, like I look back at that kind of fondly, like how it was making me unsettled and off kilter, and like showing me that they were going to push things stylistically at times beyond where maybe I was going to expect, because I think they realized that like as interesting and dynamic as a tropical island can be, they wanted to achieve a bunch of different kind of vibes than you would typically get when looking at a tropical locale. And one of the ways they're going to do that, I think, is with different lenses, with different color grading, and all that different stuff. And I think they start introducing that early, and definitely by the end of this first episode, they introduce a lot of the different, like, here are a lot of the techniques we're going to be deploying throughout this show. They kind of throw them at you just so you can start getting used to them, I guess.
Yeah. And that's fun, and it's a risk too. Like I love doing things intentionally for the sake of the story when the story calls for it. That's so important, I think, in
but
storytelling.
It's bold, right? And we appreciate boldness on this podcast, I think.
Definitely. Whether, some people's taste may feel that they went too far.
Sure.
But I like that they took the risk, and I like that they're doing it for a specific reason. And there's even like, I swear to God, there's a shot at one point that's just a shot from an iPhone or something that somebody captured, and it's the shot where there's like a caterpillar being attacked by ants. And
that's later though. That's like episode
it's
3,
much later.
I think.
Yeah, it's later. But when that happened, I was like, it's a grittier show in that way. Like they're basically doing like what works for the story and taking risks. And I think that that's like, something to be said for it. Like I noticed the difference in the quality, but it's still useful shot.
They do some bold stuff. Later on, there's a part where they show stills of trees, like literal like pictures.
I loved it. Yeah. So this is like,
what is this? Like they keep being playful with how they're presenting the show.
And that's one of my favorite parts that's bordering into like experimental film. They're literally showing like different aspect ratios of black and white photograph.
It's a photograph, yeah.
They're showing it in tandem. Like they'll cut from one picture of a tree to some action back to another tree with totally different aspect. And you're like, this is breaking the form right now. We're breaking the form of film. And in that way, I liked seeing, again, risks, and I think it's all intentional and in that way interpretive. And that's the kind of like, I like seeing that level of filmmaking, that kind of risk. So that's all to say that I think the show is definitely worth watching and is rich, and it's like trying to have you think about these scenes.
You're tackling a piece of classic literature, and like I'm saying, like capital L literature, right? Like this is part of the canon. This is something that people have talked about for a long, long time. And so I like that they were not playing it safe, because that's one of the things that great pieces of literature do, is that they often don't play it safe and try things. And at the time, it gets released, critics will look at it and go like, what is this, right? Like this is bad, this is garbage, whatever, for whatever reason. But often those are the ones that we look back on years later and go, this was ahead of its time. This was trying something new and interesting. And so I love the idea of like approaching this with like a fearlessness and a willingness to engage and trying some different techniques out. All that being said, there are parts that I did not think looked good at all. And I'm excited to get to those as well, because I don't want to seem like this is like 100% glowing, everything about this is amazing, because there were parts of the show where I was like, I don't know, man. And like, I don't love the way this looks. And it felt, I don't know, off or cheap or something. Yeah. So let's maybe, if you're ready, dive into this first episode and we can talk about it more.
So the first episode is called Piggy. They have the same director throughout, Mark Munden, and all these episodes were written by Jack Thorne. Cool. Who's the showrunner here. Piggy and Ralph find each other on a deserted island after their plane crashes. They bring the survivors together and learn that there are no adults among them. Ralph is elected chief over Jack, the head chorister, and Jack styles his choir as hunters. Rumors of a beast on the island emerge among the young boys. The group makes a signal fire at the top of the island, but it's too large and a portion of the island is destroyed.
So we talked a lot about the opening with Piggy, so let's move it out a little bit. He meets Ralph. They have this swim together where they start to bond. Beautiful location. Mm-hmm. That water is incredible.
And a lot of this is in Malaysia, by the way.
Oh,
they shot it in Malaysia. And I think some set work is being utilized. And then they also shot some scenes in the UK. Like
cool.
Some of the stuff that's back home.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Oh, that makes sense. That all looks incredible. And we start to get a bit of a bond here. He reveals that his nickname is Piggy, but he doesn't want him to share that with anyone. This is right out of the book, because then they all start meeting at the beach. The conch is found, when they do call it a conch here, not a conch, which is what I don't know how it's actually pronounced, but
I looked into it, and apparently conch is like a Florida and Caribbean thing, and I'm like, okay, well, it makes sense of why.
That's
I say
why
that.
Because that's what I always heard growing up too, and it wasn't.
It's sort of an islander way of saying it versus like I'd guess like British and English pronunciation of conch.
Conch. Anyway, that's what they call it here. So they find it, and he uses it. He blows it. He struggles to blow it at first, but then he's able to do it. And then he's starting to form a meeting, and then the choir shows up. And man, the way that is shot and introduced is so cool and weird. And this was like another, like, other than the fisheye lens, this was like a sign of things to come to me, of like, oh, we're gonna do some weird stuff here, because like they are these like weird silhouettes. They're all wearing these matching, like, very elaborate looking uniforms. They arrive, and when they arrive, it's like they're singing this like high pitched choral like thing, and I'm like, what is this? It's kind of presented as almost like heavenly, but they're dark against the frame, so I feel like there's also something ominous about it. I really liked this, and I thought it was bold, right? You know, I was like, this is really interesting. I'm curious to know where they go from here, but yeah, what an interesting little like way to introduce them and show their sort of conformity, the way they all are immediately following Jack and like deferential to him is kind of present from the jump. Like, this is clearly like a pre-established relationship he has with this group.
One of the things I thought you were going to say here is when the conch or conch is originally blown, the Littlins start showing up first on the beach.
There's a lot of them too.
And then we're getting these shots of the faces, which I already talked about. These like super hyper detailed close-ups, extreme close-ups of these kids.
And they kind of break the form, because it's like this is not part of the moment to moment of what's happening in the scene.
Right.
And yet, even as the scene's going on, we're going to do this, like, we're going to take a moment and look at this face. It's going to look directly into camera, usually sometimes a little bit up, as if looking up at an adult, which is interesting. And we're just going to like look at it and be left to interpret why this is being shown to us.
And I do think that this is bookended, and we can talk about it when we get there. But this is the early on, we're seeing the innocence, the fear, a lot of that stuff.
A lot of them do look very innocent.
And like you said, the angle of the camera is sort of looking down at them, which the camera's in a position of dominance from the children.
Yeah.
And we can talk about like where that ends up later. But yeah, the way that they appear, and we're getting a good look at a lot of these like basically extras, like you know, featured extras in the film or in the show that are these little
some of
ones.
them don't really seem to do a whole lot. I mean, like they're acting, they're performing. Some of them are so young though. I mean, these are like toddlers almost. They're like 5, like maybe 4, 3.
And it's just impressive to be able to wrangle a set full of children.
I can't imagine.
It's so wild.
That's what I was going to say.
You have to have like 3 AD, like your first AD and a bunch of other assistant directors and stuff, I assume.
The restrictions that would have been on shooting, especially you're in a different location trying to shoot all these kids, like the amount of hours you can work has to be severely limited, and for good reason, but like you have to work with this. Like, I can't imagine the logistics of trying to do this. You had like there are like 50 children,
and we see all of them in some shots. So there's like
Yeah.
it's not there's not sometimes some of the time they just can't fake it. All right, so you mentioned music as well, so I'll just get into this here.
I love the score of this show. I'm gonna find it immediately and add it to some playlists.
Well, the main theme is taken from Benjamin Britten's opera Peter Grimes. So this is like
An existing
operatic
piece
stuff,
of work. That makes
existing
sense.
piece of
Yeah.
work, yeah. There are also excerpts from Oliver Messiaen's quartet for the End of Time. Hans Zimmer and Kara Talv of Bleeding Fingers Music wrote additional music, and original music for the series was written by Cristobal Tapia de Veer. In addition to original scoring, the series incorporates powerful classical pieces to intensify emotional moments.
Yeah, it's really good, man. Hans Zimmer is the name we know well in there. Cool to see him getting his hands on it.
Yep. And there's church choral music that's used. That's some of the Benjamin Britten stuff. I mean, there's a ton in here. So
It was really good throughout. I really loved the music.
you have this choir of boys who become hunters, and like how that juxtaposition that we talked about last week, and then that being so important to the story, and then going as far as to actually get like choral music brought into it, and that just like kind of adds to the weight of the show in a sense.
Yeah, man, I love the choice to have it be a choir by William Golding is brilliant because there's an absurdity to that, and even as they're like exploring it early on, it's like, how can you be a leader? You can't even sing. As if that is so important to the quality of leadership, right? And it just kind of shows how they are a group formed around a certain thing that no longer has any real relevance to the situation, and yet they assign it relevance, as if your ability to sing, and this is brought up later too, like they keep bringing this up, like being the best singer is somehow to them an essential part of being the leader. Even though we look at it as, and like, why is this important? It seems like it should be someone who's the best at survival or the best at taking care of people and organization and all these other things seem more important. And yet these sort of shallow reasons are what they glom onto, and they say this is what is actually most important, your ability to sing.
And I think that that's obviously like a commentary on like how ridiculous some of the ways that people convince others that they're worthy to lead is.
Absolutely.
You know, it's like almost no actual weight or no actual like importance.
Well, this is also meaningless, right? Like they find this conch and like it's meaningless, but it's also like in a sense it's like absurdist and human because they assign meaning to it. And it's so interesting how Piggy is the one, and this is what he's called, by the way, in the book. Nicholas is a name that we get later, we can talk about, where we introduce his actual name. The character from the book was never revealed to have, or we never knew his real name. So sometimes I'm just going to call him Piggy because that's how I think of him, because that's what he is in the book. But anyway, he is the one who clings to this, and I think it's because he plays this role as the rule follower, the organized, like civilized one among them. But it's so interesting to see how he not only finds the conch, assigns it value, tries to repeatedly enforce this rule of like you only speak when you have the conch, and like you can't interrupt the person who has the conch. But it's so interesting how later on he's constantly clinging to it as something to be preserved and to be respected, even after it's clear that no one else thinks of it that way.
Yeah, which is, I mean, again, you can see that in modern times, in the 1940s, and what Golding was reacting to in a lot of ways, where like, you know, the rules are the rules and the laws are the laws, and people hold on to those until they don't, and they just kind of break laws and do whatever they want, and it's just like they get away with it.
And they only really have power if like someone's willing to and able to enforce them, I guess, or like if you buy in and respect it, and if you don't, then like it seems inherently absurd. Yeah.
Piggy throughout is, as we said last week, also like the voice of reason, trying to figure out areas to use the restroom, clean water supplies, like things that are so practical.
The clean water thing was like immediate, like, so this is why like you have to suspend disbelief a little bit, because like survival would actually be way harder. I feel like that it's kind of presented here. Like there would be so much illness from drinking untreated water. There would be like just all kinds of problems. And like they seem to have a fairly unlimited supply of clean water to drink. And I'm always, and like early on, I'm like, where is this coming from? And I'm like, I guess they're just drinking this like stream water
that they keep swimming in.
And like, you know, I don't, from what I understand, it's like you're really risking some severe illness if you do that, if you don't treat it in some way, boil it,
Sure.
do something with it. So yeah, it's why this is like really more about the ideas and the circumstance than it is about like a true representation of survival, because they also do some silly things, like repeatedly climbing to the top of that mountain and back is such a waste of energy and resources to do, but it's an essential part of the book, so like you keep it in. But like it's also funny how sometimes they do a little bit of the teleporting thing where like early on it's like definitely seems like it's really far trek to get up there, and then at times it's like, oh, this is so hard to do, but then at other times it seems like they could just kind of be there if they want to be there.
With Piggy sort of trying to divide labor and figure out things that are important too, I think it's important to see and note so many of these people are immature children, so they're like, that's boring work. I'm not going to do boring stuff. I want to do exciting things, and how that leads them down these paths of not taking care of the things, the fire, for example, things like that, you know, can just go to show how like even some of the characters who you think are the most level-headed, they are also just kids, and they want to play. And at one point Ralph, and I think it's a later episode, says like, you know, it's important to play, and that's just like such an inherent thing to being a child. But on an island, I don't know if it's important to play when you know your survival, as you said, would be a lot harder than it seems like the unlimited clean water and fruit would provide.
Yeah, speaking of the fruit, I think there's a little bit of a biblical reference there with him biting from the fruit. With the first character we see do it is Piggy, who it's, you know, the fruit of knowledge, and yet there's sort of inherent to the fall and all that, and like you're getting into some of the biblical references, which we talked about how are present in the novel as well. So I like that you carry those over. That all seems like it's thematically relevant, at least, or a texture. We have to talk about the style and the look of what happens when they accidentally light the mountain on fire, which is like kind of a foreshadowing what happens later. This is a key part of the novel and a key part of the end of this, which I guess a slight spoiler, but I won't say why. But a fire is very present at the end of the story, and here we get one early. And we get what I can only describe as like some of the most Game of Thrones-esque day for night shootings that looked so bad. I have just become I really don't like how this looks, and it's become so obvious to me. I can see all the signs of this was shot during the day, and they are cranking those shadows, cranking the darkness to make it look like it was shot at night. And I understand why. You're dealing with kids, and it's probably really hard, and like you can't be out there at night with children, like that would be dangerous, so like you have to shoot it during the day. So I was very, very turned off by the look of this at times. But then they start doing this thing where they start introducing red for a lot of the trees. Now, it's interesting because it's like fire early, but then it's like, I don't know if they're trying to imply in world that this is like something that was being done, or at least this is what I thought early. I was like, are they implying that like the fire somehow turned all these trees red? That's weird. I don't understand how that works, right? And then also they're doing the day for night shooting, and then like a whole set of trees are red for some reason. So I was just very confused by like what I'm supposed to take away from this. Yet I ended up really coming around on this effect towards the end, and like I really liked when they would occasionally kind of shift into this view, and like it became clear to me that no, they're showing trees that are green. And yet now we're going to shift to this inverted view, for lack of a better way to call it, where like for some reason this is all red now, and it's I guess it's left to us to interpret why it is.
As you would as an audience member, you're seeing something for the first time, and you're like, that's not right. That's not normal.
Yeah.
And like that's obviously drawing attention to it. So to talk about day for night, like I think when it's done at its best, it's almost imperceptible. But if you're shooting like noon and the shadows are all on the ground, like you're saying, it's like if it's overcast and you're shooting, there's a bunch of different ways you can shoot day for night. And I think like sometimes it's done for, again, an effect of feeling otherworldly or weird. And I remember like Nope by Jordan Peele, the film that came out. He shot a lot of day for night in that. And the night stuff looked awesome. And they used like IR filtration, but it looked awesome. It looked really good in that film. And it's again, it looks bizarre. It looks strange. So doing it here, I think that's it. You're trying to make things feel odd, weird, surreal. And I took the red trees to sort of be a embodiment of death. And I saw that like periodically when we would see characters die. And this first time, all the kids are freaking out because they can't find all the little ones.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them if at least one of them ends up, we don't see them again. The kid who had the burn mark.
Yeah, the kid with the burn mark. Yeah, he seems to die in this fire, but he's never seen again. He just goes missing.
The island has like claimed
or
someone.
Birthmark. It's a birthmark, I think.
Is it a birthmark?
I think it's a birthmark, yeah.
So, but if to me, it's like the island has claimed someone, and like, you know, through the fire, through this like surreal look of what they're doing, that some of the day for night, I thought it worked, but like you said, it was jarring at first. I was like, what's the point? Why are they doing this?
Well, and also the fire is clearly not real. Like, it's all CGI fire, and I thought at times looked awful. That's something we're so inherently familiar with. We've all sat around a fire at night. We know how flame looks as it reflects into dark areas, how it lights up faces, how it casts a scene. And so when you see someone trying to replicate that to the best of their ability with fire that is just not present, sometimes they'll have an actual light, usually to try and kind of mimic it. It's just so hard to do well, and that's why certain, if it's done really well, like there's notable films where like they'll win VFX awards just because of how well they did that. Here, I did not think this was done particularly well to me. I felt like this is really kind of immersion breaking at time where I'm like, this fire is not real. It looks hokey as hell.
I get it, yeah. But, you know, I also understand that it's like a government funded, like, I think it was multi-part, by the way. I think there were other production companies involved in association with BBC, but also kids on an island. Like, I don't understand that they're not going to light it up. And yeah.
Oh, no, I fully understand why they had to do it. But, like, just because I understand why doesn't mean I'm not going to be able to look at it and go like, this just doesn't look good to me.
Yeah, there are times that it didn't look good. There were times that I thought it was somewhat believable though too. So it was kind of a mixed bag for me on that front.
So this whole sequence was weird. I didn't really like it. I kind of want to go back and rewatch that first episode though, because again, like I feel like once I kind of came around to what the show was doing, I remember this first episode a little more fondly than maybe I actually felt about it at the time. So I remember thinking like I was still very much on the fence about whether or not this was going to be a good show. By the end of episode 1, I wasn't sure yet, you know?
Yeah. There was another scene, I think this is in the first episode, where they find the pilot in the chair. And there's this sort of like innocent cruelty that I think boys can like stereotypically have.
They try and push him to the beach.
First they're gonna carry him, and then it's too heavy, they can't do it, and so they're like, and then Jack specifically is like, there's a quick way to get him down, and they shove him off this cliff. And again, it's like some of the kids are horrified, some of the kids are like into it. Like Jack seems like he was like into it.
Well, and there's that one guy with him, I think it's Roger, maybe. He looks like he's a little bit of a psychopath at times. Like he looks like he gets really into some of the violence and
tossing the rocks at the kids.
He's kind of this is true in the book too, and he's kind of like Jack's favorite. And he seems like he's trying to impress Jack a lot with like his acts of violence, which there's a lot of real world examples of this, like currying favor with a strong man by trying to like, oh, this is what you want, I'm gonna do it and then some.
And just like I said, there's almost like an innocence there of like, not, I don't know, did Jack really not understand that was wrong in a sense? Like, is he just not like worldly enough? He hasn't been around long enough?
Well, different scenarios are different.
There's like a curiosity there as well. Like, you know, you hear about kids, I mean, of course it's like sometimes the sign of a psychopath, but you hear about kids who like hunt lizards and they'll like do crazy shit with them, or bugs or whatever, like
harming animals.
But that's like, there's something that I think that if it was impressed upon them, maybe that's a like sort of a nature nurture kind of thing to be talked about as well.
Well, and like Roger, I think he seems like the kind of guy who would not hesitate to kill the pig, you know, like,
right.
Whereas Jack, we literally see do that. I don't know if it's in this episode or next one.
It's actually the next episode, yeah.
Yeah, so maybe let's move into episode 2. We got to keep things moving just for time's sake.
So episode 2 is called Jack. Jack is fixated on killing a pig. His hunters succeed but allow the signal fire to go out while a ship passes. Ralph blames Jack for the group not being rescued, and Jack starts his own camp in retaliation.
This hunting of the pig is really interesting from a character perspective, thematically. It's funny because like the amount of calories that get burned in this attempt makes it like totally not worth it. It's such like almost like a luxury thing to do.
Well, and it does seem like they have endless fruit.
It seems like they have endless fruit, so like you don't need to do this. And then just this is the first time we get like a true flashback. We see, I think he might even just be on the plane. And like there's a couple of these moments where we're seeing glimpses of the outside world. This is not something that was present in the book at all. We read that there was an opening of this that was cut by the publisher, or was cut by the editor. And whether or not the novel is better for it, I guess, is open to interpretation. But if it was interesting here that we're going to start introducing a little bit of flashbacks. And we get some implications about that maybe Jack's lying about his family, that maybe his father isn't all the things he's cracking him up to be, as he's talking big about him. And we get this insight into Jack as a character, who to me seems like a guy who he wants to be perceived as strong. He wants to be the center of attention. He wants to be loved and respected and feared, maybe. But he is actually not very brave. He's a bit of a coward, which is something that Simon points out later. And I think he's not actually a psychopath, because he often looks like regretful about things that are happening and kind of get out of control. It's like his primary motivation is not to harm, but his primary motivation is to be adored and to be the center and to be respected. And his need for that drives him to do things that harm. And I think the harm becomes something he's willing to accept on this path, this like all-consuming need to be the center of attention, to be adored, to be respected. And so he's kind of like willing to do it, even as like there is a bit of humanity in him. And that's what makes him, I think, a little bit more complex and interesting. He's not just completely despicable. As much as I hated him, and boy did I hate him by the end especially, but like here they do a good job of like establishing the character's more complex than that. And he is a young boy too, so we have to keep that in mind, right?
He's a bit pitiable because you can infer that like his dad isn't around or doesn't give him the time of day, and we learn from that he and Simon are like left alone for the holidays, and his family goes off without him, and like so his interesting relationship with Simon too that we can get into. They like see each other in a way, and Simon sees him some, but then Jack like puts on a facade often, and you can see that happening here on the island too. And the way that like he's trying to climb up to get the piece of the plane, and he gets scared on the way up.
Insane thing to try and climb. So high.
Gets scared, and then his other friends come up and help him down, and they seem like they see the vulnerability within him and like don't say anything about it. And
well, he tells them like this, don't tell anyone this happened. Yeah.
Right. And Piggy sees him when he can't kill the little piglet that he was chasing. And Piggy's like,
he blames him. He's like, it's your fault. We see this time and again where Jack does this.
But yeah, it's seeing his sort of, there's a motivation there that I think obviously is being added in. You could infer it in the original source material, but here it feels like it's added in. And I thought to good depth, like it adds good depth to a character, makes him sympathetic and pitiable. But as time goes, you can see how somebody who's sympathetic and pitiable can get drawn into this sort of mob mentality, or this high that he's getting from being in charge or whatever, and then sort of spiral into something that he wasn't originally. And that sort of arc on the way down is definitely cool to track in this show. I think Jack is one of the more interesting characters in the show.
Seems like a little narcissist, honestly, in the making to me. Where it's like his need to be the center of attention and be loved becomes so overwhelming that he will like insert that over reality. Like he'll believe the story he's telling about himself over what actually happened.
Yeah, and then they actually in the hunt they actually like cover themselves with mud and everything.
Yeah, we get this like extended like face painting thing that goes on. There's like a ritual here. We get this interaction, I think it's with Simon, where he comes in and he sees him like by the little like waterside painting his face, and he offers to do it for him. And there's this like kind of like moments of tenderness. And I don't know. It's one of those where it's like open to interpretation, but like there were times where I was getting romantic interest, perhaps exists between these two, or maybe there's just an energy here that neither of them can really define.
Yeah, it's hard to define it, especially as the audience here, because we don't know what the characters are thinking, but it is kind of, they're at least brotherly, maybe romantic, I think. And there's some, like, throughout, it seems like these people, they're all sleeping very close together over top of each other for comfort.
But also, I think it's, like, asking us, how do we feel about it? Like, because it's engaging with masculinity and how, like, any sort of signs of affection are interpreted in certain ways.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Like the show is showing I think a bunch of different looks at masculinity and how that is like society, especially like the 50s, wouldn't have necessarily wanted these children to be showing affection for each other in this way. Like they should be stiff upper lip and like men at this point, and basically grow up and be adults now, and they're being treated that way. They need to be like acting that way as well. But they're all just trying to find their way and figure out their feelings, and they're all in a time when they shouldn't be finding their feelings, as per society.
Yeah. We get another series of shots here of the children, and it says they're starting to paint their faces.
Mm-hmm.
So we see like a transition, and I think it's Roger's like the only one who's like smiling in his little like close up. So just interesting, man. We get and then we get the brutal killing of the pig, which I think is like maybe the other main thing we need to talk about. They surround it and they come in and kill it, and maybe you could argue it's not as brutal as it is actually in the book, but when they switch from trying to stab it to just beating it with their sticks. It's awful.
It's bad, yeah. It's rough.
It is a very kind of hokey-looking CGI pig, so you have to kind of buy in, to the reality of it. But there's a surrealist element to it as well. The way it sprays blood all over Jack is a little hard to believe, but it works. And then the after effects where they cut the head off of it, they're carrying it. We get this crazy shot where he's like laying and like he's kind of like draped across a like waterfall, and then it starts playing in reverse, and we see the water coming up off of it, and like, what is that? Like, I don't know. There's some cool decisions being made here that make it feel surreal and otherworldly.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they're like so proud of themselves and involved in this moment. It feels like a moment of just like bliss.
Yeah, because this is before they found out that they've messed up. Oh, but then they're relishing this. This is kind of the birth of this other camp a little bit. Like, this is Jack at his highest. The pig, which we know from the book, has some symbolic... it's called Lord of the Flies. This is a name for Beelzebub. This is like Satan, perhaps. So like the way the severed pig head is positioned, it's like staring at these boys while they're doing all of this.
Singing with it on a spike, and its like mouth is opening as they're sort of singing the songs and stuff. Yeah.
It's horrible. It's horrifying looking. And then they find all this luggage too. And we get a very interesting sequence where they're like pulling out a lot of these like women's clothing. Which I'm not sure like why there's so much women's clothing, but there is. Maybe there's a couple women who died in the crash, I guess. But they start pulling this all out and like applying makeup as part of this paint. But like, yeah, like the one kid wearing a skirt, the furs that get draped, pantyhose pulled over the face to be a mask. I don't know. It's just interesting as these like feminine products and things are taken and turned into part of this ritual, part of this tribe that's developing here. I don't know. It felt like they were saying something, but I'm having trouble like really sussing it out.
Just, I think, engaging with masculinity and what someone would think of as masculine, and maybe these kids just haven't experienced what society would have them believe about these garments or something, or they're just they're free in the way that like society doesn't have its constraints on them for that stuff yet, so they're like putting it on and not thinking anything of it.
Yeah. But also like, I don't know, like they're drawn to it as well, right? Like they all seem drawn to it, like they want it, but they don't understand it. They don't know how to wear it properly. They don't know what to do with it. And then one of the final parts of this episode is the diary is found. It's Simon's diary, and Jack is like, do not read that. And so like you get this implication that like maybe there's something there he's embarrassed about. But then we end on him reading it, and like it's almost a tender moment. So it's like he has shame around this relationship in some way, and we don't know why.
I think it's that it would have revealed the vulnerable parts of himself that he's revealed to Simon.
Yeah, Simon has seen him in a vulnerable state. Yeah,
and could be writing about it.
And again, like it's all about perception. He talks about how this is all a test. This is all like some big test that he has to pass. Is something that he kind of repeatedly expresses.
Yeah, tests of like masculine, like his dad went through it, and now he has to go through it, and all that kind of stuff. And like some sort of trip that his dad took made him a man, like trekking through the wilderness and living off the land, and now he has to do it as well, and that's testing him in that way.
And then ironically, of course, this need for it to be a test and a contest is the thing that makes him fail so spectacularly.
Right. So episode 3 is called Simon. Simon is upset that Jack has stolen his diary, which reveals the depths of Simon's feelings for Jack. The two camps form an uneasy truce to search for the beast and are terrified by a dead paratrooper. After another argument, Jack departs for his own camp again, luring the other boys to him with promises of meat and freedom from rules. Simon slips away from the party and communes with imagined voices in the undergrowth. As Jack's party descends into animalistic chaos, his hunters seize upon what they decide is the beast, beating Simon to death.
Yeah, man. What a cool episode. I really liked this one. This was where I think I really turned from skeptical to buying into the show. It gets some of the more surreal moments. There's Simon kind of wandering around looking kind of lost and having a vision quest almost too.
He's doing like interesting crawling that he'd seen Jack do and smearing himself in mud. And then he's also like sort of doing these interpretive dances and stuff that are like almost like trances.
Yeah, so he goes out into the woods at one point and he goes and he finds the body. It's that body of the pilot, and it's like hanging off the side of the cliff, and it's clearly rotted, and he starts seeming like he's talking to it or something, and he looks like he's like putting something on, and he's like touching his head and like moving around, and like that's the part where it's like almost a dance. And we aren't privy to what that is, like what is going on. We just see it from the kind of externally. We see a lot of his like push and pull between Ralph, who he is now drawn to. I think we see him literally like snuggling up to him at night, who he has sort of replaced Jack with Ralph. And yet it seems like he does, he needs someone to like latch onto. And there's like a moment where Ralph calls him baddie and kind of pushes him away where he seems really hurt, and it's like this need to like glom onto somebody, I think is kind of part of his downfall. And then I just love some of the experimental filmmaking stuff we have going on here, because we really get a lot of the red fronds. We get parts, I think, where they're in the shelter, where the whole shelter starts looking red. If it doesn't happen here, it happens in the next episode for sure. And then there's this really cool part where he goes out to the water. I think it's a prelude to him talking to the pig head, the rotten pig head, where everything is red, except for him standing at the water side. And like I was like, okay, this is a very deliberate choice they're making here, and it looks very cool, and it implies something evil is like lurking, it's dangerous, and I don't know. It's just, and I feel like a really cool scene from this.
In the book, Simon is told by voices that he's not going to make it off the island by Beelzebub, by the Lord of the Flies, the pig head here.
I feel like the pig talks a little less in the show.
Yeah, and here I think that like the red that we had seen when the kid died in the fire, I think we're seeing it happen again. And Simon is kind of like predicting and seeing premonitions of his own death in the way that like he's interpreting all of this red.
He sees the boy with the birthmark on his face, and he's dressed in like his clothes from before the island. So it's almost like he's seeing a ghost, which we see returns again in the next episode. So like, yeah, is he like maybe a little bit spiritual? He's the one who's like communing with the Lord of the Flies. This is from the title of the entire show, so this is clearly a very important moment.
In the book, it says like the voice is telling him, you knew about this evil in all of us or whatever. Like it kind of says the morals or some of the messaging that I think Golding was getting at. I think that this is it being interpreted here. Is like this is a way for you to kind of see whatever, maybe the red is the evil inherent in the kids, or the evil overtaking them because the fire representing like that it getting out of control, and then here preemptively before he's killed by them. I just think it is like kind of a harbinger of death, and it is like really surreal and I think it works well.
Well, we also get the paratrooper, this body that lands, and then they go up to see the beast. And what a cool way they shot this, where the whole body moves and lurches forward, and it looks almost like it has demon wings, and like it looks really disturbing, and like it really sells them being terrified of it and calling it a beast and not knowing what it is.
Well done, and it seemed practical mostly to me. Maybe augmented some with the CG, but it was definitely cool to see it like pop out in that way. Yeah, and I think, is it Simon that kind of lingers behind and looks at it?
Yeah, he looks at it deeper. It seems like, because like the implication in the book is that he's the one who sees through it and knows what it is. Yeah. Maybe because he stared at the other body is what they're implying in the show here. We get less like proof of that he's the one who can like tell that this isn't actually a beast. Because in the book, he's returning to them to tell them, hey, this thing that we all thought was a beast isn't a beast. But we do get him return, and then we get one of the craziest sequences of the entire show. And that is this feast, this party, this thing where they're all completely decked out now in some wild, like they're getting more and more wild, right? They're getting more and more masked and painted, and it's getting more elaborate and bizarre. And we get them all doing these dances on the beach, and Piggy and Ralph have come to this, and they see it, but they're not participating. And so this is a key difference from the book. And this is one of the big departures that I think is interesting. I'm okay with it. other people may disagree, but Ralph and Piggy are not participating. They aren't drawn in and caught up in this moment. And when the murder of Simon happens, Simon arrives, he's crawling on the ground, and there's like a ritualistic killing of Simon because they think he's the beast, kind of, maybe. And it's led by Jack, who is sort of like leading this cry, leading this mantra, this chant. And he has these moments, and he does this multiple times, where he sees what happens because of his actions, and he looks kind of horrified, but then he like doesn't stop it from happening, or it doesn't change his ways. He kind of just doubles down, which just makes me kind of hate him even more. But it's like, how dare you look surprised in this moment? How dare you look like you have regrets? Because like, fuck you. I don't know. That's the way I feel about it. But I think notably Ralph and Piggy do not participate. They're not stabbing Simon. They're not a part of this group. In the book, they are. And that definitely affects how I feel about this moment in the book versus the show.
I think this is the biggest sort of finger on the scale moment that Jack Thorne put in here. And I think it is an interesting update for the times, because I think Golding, as I said, was reacting to his era, his experiences, his traumas. And what I took away from that story is like there is some ambiguity and some nuance, but it seems like the messaging is that young men inherently have this evil in them, or people in general.
People,
maybe have
because
this
he made the argument that he was representing humanity when he did this, not just men.
So if that's the case, I think this is Jack Thorne saying, I think that there is many paths that masculinity or society can take, and one of those is being a victim of some of this stuff and being somebody who's standing up to it but doesn't have the support or the power or whatever. And I think it's just such a smart change, because I feel like while it's so conflicting that somebody like Piggy would be involved in this murder, and that's such a complicated thing to have in the original story, and I think is ripe with all kinds of things that you can dig into, but to not have them do it, I think shows the other avenues, and in that way I felt like it was updated for the time. And because I do feel like I agree more with this sentiment than maybe the original sentiment.
Yeah, I mean, it just keeps Ralph's hands a little more clean. He even at one point calls out, "Stop!" I think they don't hear him, or they don't care. And it maintains them as a little bit more truly sympathetic, and that they haven't participated in this. You do lose a bit of that sense of the challenge that the book presents to you, the reader, to say, you're no better than this. None of us are. We all can get drawn into this. Even these characters you like, even Piggy and Ralph, they're caught up in this. And there's like a challenge to your soul here, right? Of like reckoning maybe with that, like the inner aptitude or ability to create harm and violence that the book challenges you with. Maybe gives you a bit of a break here of like saying like, I would be the good one who wouldn't participate. I would be the one who sees this for what it is. And it gives you an out. Now that's not necessarily bad. And like, I think it does serve to set up the next episode where we have a real fondness for Ralph that maybe you would struggle with if you'd seen him participate in this. But I think there is maybe more credence to the way the book did it than I'm like wanting to give it, to grant it. But like just in retrospect, I'm like, you really do achieve a certain uncomfortable truth, I guess, if you want to call it that, or uncomfortable situation that makes you question your own culpability, I guess, in this.
Which is a great point, and I agree. Like that idea of a story challenging you in those ways, I think it's such a notable thing and something that's worth doing. Mm-hmm. I think it was probably, if I had to guess, Thorne sort of updating it to say, what do audiences need to see right now, and what are they going to respond to most? I don't know if the story would be as legendary as it is without this sort of everyone's bad in the story, and everyone has a part to play. And maybe that's a commentary on war. It's like if you participate in war, like no one comes out unscathed, and that idea that like something can just take a hold of you and cause you to be so emotional or passionate. Yeah. And in taking that out, I do think you lose something.
And fear, like, because a lot of it is fear-based too, right? The fear of the beast, yeah.
Right. So I have some stuff here about what Thorne has said about the story from NPR also. It is the book that changed me. Specific portrayal of damage that really fascinates me. They're boys that were brought up in Britain in the 40s, the experience through their parents, the horrors of the war, the damage of the war, and then go to this island and start acting it out. So it's a psychological study of a time as well as a psychological study of a gender. I do think that there are interesting things to explore within masculinity as a prism. That prism fascinates me, and thankfully with Adolescence, which we talked about, and Lord of the Flies, I've got to explore one aspect of it. There are many, many other aspects of it I'd like to explore. This is from the New York Times. So he emphasizes that Lord of the Flies was not about some kind of inherent toxicity in men and boys that makes them descend into barbarism outside the structures of society. He says, quote, "I have a real problem with the thesis that some people have that Lord of the Flies is a book about who we are at our essence. Lord of the Flies in this version is about what makes some boys act in one way and others act in another. I think there are boys that are capable of cruelty and brutality, and I think there are boys that are capable of good and cooperation." Ike Talbot, who plays Simon, put it as, "Golding chose to make it about boys because boys are suggestible, not because they're evil."
Yeah, so I don't know how true this is about Golding and what his original thesis was. We talked a little bit about things he had said about it. And I think the common interpretation about the inherent toxicity and evil that lies in the hearts of all people, not just boys, I do think was something that Golding was trying to talk about, and like how law is like the only thing that can sort of oppose that. But I love what Jack Thorne is saying, and I think that is a valid interpretation, and I think it's definitely what's going on here, because we see these flashbacks and we get these implications of what has led these boys to this place. And there's one point where Simon says to Jack, I think your father's probably a lot like mine. So it's this implication that they both come from either broken homes or homes where they are faced abuse, or someone faced abuse in their home, that they are lying about, that they're keeping secret from people. And so there's definitely a strong sense of like our upbringing influencing us. Now, in the book, we talked about how they are surrounded by war. They're the beast itself is a soldier, right? Who's died. So the implication of the war reaching them even on this island is very real. And so I think there is precedent for that, but you're kind of expanding that influence to be not just the influence of war, but the influence of upbringing and, the just the society itself, and like how it raises boys to be.
Well, and to your point, I think we're about to get to it with Ralph's episode, but there's also, we see a little bit of Ralph's backstory with his father, and there's an implication that like his father is involved and around, and maybe it's something to, like you said, maybe Thorne is making a point about like the upbringing of a child and what you can imbue into them, and like maybe that has something to do with where these characters end up, as Ralph has a sort of through line of goodness in him. And that is a significant change, because I don't think we could ever see this Ralph being a part of Simon's murder.
No,
but
it doesn't. The way they set up Ralph to be in the show didn't make any sense for him to be. I agree.
But again, you lose something without that shock of just like, oh man, anyone's capable of it. Yeah. So,
and then we see this shot of Simon like floating out to sea again, like in a very weird, like it almost doesn't make any sense why this would happen, but I thought it was a powerful sequence regardless.
Yeah. All right, so the final episode is called Ralph. Jack's group steals Piggy's glasses to make fire, and the remnants of Ralph's camp approaches him to demand their return. Roger, a quirist who now delights in violence, throws a rock at Piggy's head and mortally wounds him. Ralph escapes with Piggy and cares for him until he dies. Flashbacks reveal that Ralph recently lost his mother. Still hunted by the rival group, Ralph confronts Jack a final time and tells him he has no interest in being chief over what the island has become. Roger proposes the hunters start a fire to smoke Ralph out of hiding. Their plan works, but upon emerging onto the beach, Ralph finds that the smoke has drawn the attention of a passing warship, and a naval officer has landed ashore. The officer is initially dismissive of the boy's exploits, but is shocked to learn that at least 2 of the group have been killed. He admonishes Ralph's leadership as not befitting the British before taking the survivors from the island.
Well, let's back up to the beginning of the episode. We get this extended flashback where Ralph is with his father hunting, or at least observing a buck in the woods. And there's this interesting moment where he warns him about it being rutting season and how dangerous he is. But then he's like, let's play a game. When it runs, we'll run after it, basically. And Ralph's like, I thought you just said it was dangerous. And he's like, come on. And they go to do it, and then Ralph does get hurt. I think he like cuts himself. He hurts his leg. And then it goes to a part where we see his mom sick. But then we get another interaction between him and his father, where his father's like, I have an idea. Let's go out into the woods tomorrow. And it seems like he wants to kind of like continue to explore this kind of side of him. But Ralph pushes back and says, actually, I'd like to stay home with mom. I think there's a couple of cool things that happen here. Like, you can tell that this kind of hurts his father's feelings. I think his father like was hoping this was going to be like a bonding thing for them. But this guy seems more well-rounded than we've heard about, because he ultimately says like, yeah, that does sound fun, you know, and then he makes the joke about the bed bugs and stuff, and like he seems okay with it, right? And so like the modeling the behavior of like being rejected but not you know, leading you to act out, I think is great. And then yeah, the mother ends up passing away, and in a later flashback we have this other guy, just like random guy there who works with his dad, I think, say he's going to need you now. And so the idea of like needing emotional support, men not just being stiff upper lip strong, but actually like the idea that like a child could provide something necessary for an adult. A lot of this gets introduced here, and like you'll notice like some of these things are maybe coded by society as being more feminine, you know, like staying home, care, love, and how Ralph seems like the most well-rounded emotionally, because he's had these experiences and he draws on them, I think, in the present.
This is one of the, I mean, I think Jack maybe sees his mom at one point in one of his flashbacks, but this is the most we see of, I think, women in the story.
Yeah.
And for Ralph to value and clearly be affected and want to stay with his mom and all that other stuff shows also the influence of him, like you said, being well-rounded, being sort of in touch with both sides of his heritage there, like from where he comes and who helped raise him, and there's just so much talk of like my father this, my father that, and for him to have lost his mother, to have valued his mother, you know, in all these different ways, I think is showing it's showing more depth to the character in that one.
Yeah, it's really cool, man. It definitely pushes Ralph in a certain direction, makes us really like him. We see now this showdown on the beach, where they go to get Piggy's specs get stolen, and he wants to go get them back, right? So they go back together, and we see the new setup. And I love that there's just like one kid there who's just like dancing, and he just continues dancing the whole time, never stops, no matter what's happening, even as they're like fighting and stuff. And like you can see this like cult of personality that's built around Jack, and the way his like sycophants are starting to behave around him. And I love there's like this kind of like thing happening between Roger and Maurice, where like Jack will have an idea and then it won't work, and then like Roger will blame Maurice for it and be like, Maurice's idea was terrible, and then Jack will be like, yeah, your idea was terrible. And like the way that feeds into the narcissism of like, you can never have a bad idea, you know, supreme leader. It was clearly someone else's fault, and we're gonna now we're gonna find a scapegoat, and how like these guys like turn on each other, and how it starts to eat its own. I think it's starting to get shown here. Like you can imagine like as soon if like they were to like kill Ralph and like eliminate this other group, like they're gonna start turning on each other fast. Like, you know, Maurice is the next one out, right? Like he's gonna be the scapegoat for something. You can feel it happening, and Jack I think also is such a clear example of stochastic terrorism. He starts doing these things where he's like, let's chant, you know, kill the Nick pig or whatever. You know, he starts like chanting these things about Piggy, and has everybody doing it. And then Roger hears him saying this, and he's like, you wanted this, right? And he throws that rock that ends up delivering the fatal wound. And Jack has the fucking gall to look horrified, like he didn't want this. And it makes me so mad, because it's so fucking true how these guys, you know, he's full on Trumpian here, right? He's just saying shit. Now, who knows if Trump ever feels any regret about any of this, but like the idea that you're just saying stuff and, oh, I don't know what people are going to do based off the things I'm saying. I'm going to say, let's, you know, stop the Nick pig and like, you know, all this stuff. And then like somebody does it. And then, yeah, to have the gall to look like, oh, I didn't mean that.
A la January 6th, right, is what you're...
Exactly, man.
Yeah.
You're getting everybody like driven up into a fucking fervor, right, to commit violence.
Yeah.
And then you're gonna act like, oh, I don't know why this happened. I have no idea.
Yeah, so Piggy's death is an extended sequence in the show rather than in the book. It's pretty quick and it's heartbreaking. And
yeah, because in the book he like basically immediately dies.
Right.
But instead he's got a mortal wound here. He travels with Ralph for a while and he's slowly bleeding out.
Yeah, it sucks. What a way to go. And like Ralph is doing everything he can, and Piggy is so thankful for it. He doesn't want to be left alone, but he's also, trying to get him water and all this other stuff.
It's emotional, man. I found I was actually getting choked up a little bit watching this. And again, this is a story I know well, and I knew it was coming, and I knew his fate. But like the way they draw it out, the relationship that's formed between the two of them. Ralph apologizes for saying the nickname, and then Piggy's like, Nicholas is like, you didn't know you were gonna like me. It's okay. It's all really powerful. And then like the going to find water, coming back, like keeping his promise. There's just a lot of really good stuff here. And then I think the part that actually got me the most too was like the next day when we see him, drag him out to bury him, and then we get this shot where they're like pulling away from the gravesite.
Yeah.
And we see the heel marks from the drag cutting through the mud. And for whatever reason, I just love that detail. I was obsessed with it. And I think that was the moment that got me. And I was just like, it just really hit home. It's really good stuff. And I actually, because at first I was like, oh, they're not going to kill him. I don't know how I feel about that. Is he going to survive this? But when I became clear that like, oh, no, he's dying. It's just, if they're just drawing it out, I'm like, oh, okay. They're just really driving home the tragedy of this.
Yeah.
And actually
it
thought it was really effective. And we see a lot of those weird inversions of color are starting to happening here, where like one time we'll see the scene and it's green, and then the next moment everything's gone red and weird. And
so this eventually gets into the battle with Jack, and Ralph and Jack fight each other.
Oh, there was that part for sure where they're like combing. And like Jack absolutely is like, let's comb this or whatever. And then like afterwards, Roger turns to him and is like, Maurice's plan to comb didn't work. And he's like, yeah, Maurice, didn't work, And that was that part where I was like, oh, this is so fucking out of the playbook of these people, right? Like where it's like, it can't possibly be your fault. So we're going to find someone who's standing near you to blame. And yeah, it's a very real moment there. But yeah, they fight, they battle. Ralph is like, you have to take responsibility for this. Do you want to be leader? It's just me and you now. And then what does Jack do? He calls all of his group. He can't, because he's a coward. He can't stand up to him one-on-one. He's got to have his group, and refusing to take any responsibility for anything that's happened, right? Like, none of this is my fault. This is your fault, actually, right? Like, and what a fucking clear example of that, right? Like, actually, this is all your fault. Ralph, you made this happen, he repeatedly tells him at the end. It's just that reverse bullshit, right? Actually, your fault.
Yeah. It's exhausting. But now we get to the part where they smoke him out, the fire is raging, he runs down to the beach, and there's this naval officer that's there. And it plays out kind of similarly to the book, but rather than turning away when they're all crying in the book, he like watches them all cry. And there's this moment of like dismissal of like, I would have thought you young British men could have done better. I think that's a line out of the book.
And, he's like, I thought you would have done better.
And it just feels like young men coming back from war and being like, scarred by it and having dealt with all this stuff. And then the older folk who maybe didn't fight in that war but fought in another war look at it and they're like, oh, come on, we dealt with the same thing. And I don't know, minimizing people's traumas or minimizing as they come back and not understanding them or not connecting with them. And I felt like there was something being said there. And then we get this sequence of shots as we had in the beginning and then the middle, where we see all the close-ups of the faces of the kids are so like, wild or
covered in blood, dirt, paint, wearing masks. It's wild. Yeah, my read of that conversation is part of it is dismissal. It is this idea that like your children, what you're doing here can't be that serious. Mm-hmm. Part of it is an unwillingness to engage with the reality of it. Like when he says that 2 people have died, he's like, that can't be true. You know what I mean? Like he seems like almost unwilling to believe it. And then, because he's like, oh, hopefully your war didn't have any casualties or whatever. And he's like, actually, yes, it did.
Because he thinks they're just playing
He thinks they're just playing at war, yeah. And then I think the key for me is the unwillingness to accept the role that he and society have played. Like, this is a world at war. We've seen flashes in the sky repeatedly from, like, gunfire of some kind, cannon fire. And that has had an effect on these children. That has an effect on the next generation, right?
Mhm.
Like, this is a legacy you are leaving behind, and there's such a unwillingness to accept responsibility. And we're seeing it, I think, in this captain too. And this is like what Jack has done, right? Like, his unwillingness to accept responsibility. And that is not, like, keenly on display when he says, "Who's in charge here?" And Ralph looks at Jack, and Jack looks away, ashamed. And then Ralph says, "I am." And this whole fucking time, Jack has been like trying to usurp his power. And in this moment where like actual accountability has come, what does Jack do? He's like, "Nope, not my fault, not my situation. I didn't cause any of this." Completely unwilling to accept responsibility for anything that's happened. And Ralph does it because, again, like, he's I think the more respectable, like, what we should want in a leader, in the sense that, like, he'll take responsibility for the situation even when it's gotten out of control, even when it's like hard and it's almost unfair for him to have to accept responsibility. He still does it. And it's just like, it just shows like what we should want in leaders, and how much it is really what Ralph is doing here and not what Jack has done.
Yeah, it shows his true character and how, like, through thick and thin, he was willing to do the right thing. But this takes us, I think, to the end here, and probably time for us to decide on book versus movie.
Book versus movie, yeah, man.
Book versus show here.
Yeah. Do you want? How have you start things off?
So I felt like after I read the story last week, I liked being reacquainted with it in a different way as an adult. It didn't strike me as this masterpiece that I kind of thought it was in my mind. I understand the significance of it. I understand the weight of it and like what the messaging is and how challenging. And I said, like, when I read it as a kid, I found it to be so profound. And I just didn't feel it quite so much on this read. I really enjoy it, like the story overall and some of what is put on display. And then in watching this, I was interested to see if this was going to be like my favorite show of the year. I was like, what if this is just like this thing? Because I'd heard a lot of good things. And through these performances and through this like great cinematography, great sound design and music, the locations are awesome. I found like a really like grounded, lived in, like, I think a quality adaptation of the original work. So in this case, I'm going to take the show because I felt like those changes, while maybe simplifying or making them a little more palatable to like your general audience, which isn't necessarily something that I appreciate in a story. I like complexity and questions and everything as the book presents, but I liked those changes enough, along with sort of where the story led us and some of that backstory and the motivations behind characters, and maybe a pathway to good people and people who are misguided, and then people who are just truly evil, and everything in between. I liked that there was that variety throughout the whole show.
Yeah, man. I think you put it well. Like, there's a lot going for this show. The book, I think, it stood the test of time for a reason. And yet I had a sense that it had a little bit more of like almost nihilist message behind it, of like everything's kind of meaningless and cruel. What you can take out of that, I think, is very interpretive. And I think you can read that book and try and find like kind of a humanist message in there. And I think it sounds like Jack Thorne did. And then this interpretation of it, I think, is a largely faithful version of this story, and yet it pushes it into that interpretation. And I happen to like that interpretation, and I think that interpretation is definitely more valid here. This version of the story, I think, leans into what I would almost argue is a more humanist, or at least more human-centered message behind how people can be driven to do these things. What could lead us to there? Like, it makes a lot of ties between what we're seeing and what has come before. The violence of society, the violence of the sins of the father essentially being passed on to these children, is very on display. And I find that to be a slightly more interesting story to tell. And I know that people will debate that, but for me, it aligns more with how I feel about the world. And I liked that the darkness and the brutality of this story is definitely maintained, and yet we were able to take it in a slightly different direction while still leaving a lot of it pretty open to interpretation. So I'm with you, man. I'm going to take the show here. I actually think this is the best version of Lord of the Flies I've experienced, and I'm going to be recommending this show to people. Is it perfect? No. Like I said, there are a lot of parts I really didn't like how they looked, but overall, I think this is a really quality adaptation, about as good as I could hope for, honestly, for a Lord of the Flies adaptation. I think this is quite excellent.
Yeah, I think it's great, and I think it's coming at a time where it's cool to re-engage with this material and kind of pit it against our current modern day and see if there's any similarities, which I think there are.
Yeah, man. Fascism is such a reality of the world we live in right now in this country that it almost feels like too easy. But like, goddamn, if it's not just our everyday that we see all the time in our politics.
Well, notably, it's also international production. It's a British production, right? And so I think fascism is rearing its head in a lot of places throughout the world.
I mean, it is, yeah. All right, man. So that's going to be it for Lord of the Flies. But if you all enjoyed this coverage, if you enjoyed us talking about Lord of the Flies book or show, let us know in the form of a rating and review on whatever app you chose to listen on. If you're on YouTube, make sure to like this video, engage with us by leaving a comment. Let us know your thoughts on it. How do you interpret this? Is it more humanist? Is it more nihilistic than I'm, maybe giving it credit for? I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, honestly.
And be sure to connect with us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, TikTok, all of those at Ink to Film, and we're basically on every social media platform.
Yep, and we also have a Discord channel, which there'll be a link for in the show notes. We'd love to have you join us and chat with us over there. If you'd like to support this podcast another way, we do have a Patreon, and on Patreon, you're able to vote on upcoming projects. Speaking of which, we have one that was just selected by our community. I don't think the voting is officially closed, but the last I looked at it, it was heavily leaning in a certain direction. So I think we know what we're going to be covering next, but I guess I probably shouldn't announce it because it hasn't officially ended. But yeah, that was decided by our patrons. So if you want to affect what we're going to cover in the future, that's going to be the best way to do it. We also have bonus episodes and all kinds of stuff over there. So patreon.com/inktofilm. We'd love to have your support.
And thank you to Ross Bugden for the use of our intro and outro music.
That's it. Time to throw the conch into the sea, bust it against a rock. I don't know. Drop our specs and just float out to the sea.
Yeah.
It's a depressing way.
The island has claimed more victims.
Yeah. That's going to be it for Lord of the Flies. So until next time.
Keep adapting.